Okay, welcome back, everyone. If you are indeed back, we have entered or are entering the fourth quarter of today's very rich and enriching program. And allow me, without further ado, to introduce our next speaker. When we were first founding this association, we wondered if we would succeed in passing on our ideas about philosophical practice and our experience and so forth to the next generation, as it were. And I'd have to say unequivocally, yes. It's been one of the great joys of being in practice and of seeing APA grow for 25 years, has been to witness the emergence of, as it were, the next generation, or at least people younger than ourselves, who are taking to philosophical practice, being well-schooled in philosophy, and then becoming effective practitioners. So this is a great joy and reward for us. And our next speaker is exactly of this generation of younger practitioners who are emerging on the scene. Kevin Kales is, just bear with me, from Roanoke College in Salem, Virginia. He became certified in client counseling by APA in June of 2022. He's an adjunct lecturer at Roanoke College, and he also took advantage of one of the tools that our program gives to people, which is the expertise to conduct an IRB-approved research project on the efficacy of philosophical counseling, which, again, Kevin carried out at Roanoke College. He also holds the position of adjunct lecturer at Virginia Western Community College and Radford University, and if I may say, has also become a facilitator of Socratic Dialogue, which is another wonderful thing that we're happy to see. So welcome, Kevin. Please unmute yourself. And I'm trying to spotlight you, not very effectively at this point, but I need you to unmute. There you go. And now we can hopefully spotlight you. I'm not quite sure what Zoom is doing at this moment, but maybe that I have too many hosts or too many co-hosts, and I don't quite see a way to spotlight you, which is very strange. Are you able to spotlight yourself by any chance?
Let me try to spotlight him, Lou.
Oh, okay. There he is.
Okay.
Oh, it looks like you're in charge, Rick. All right, excellent. Kevin, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I've enjoyed it so far, and I'm grateful to be able to share my work. What I'm going to be sharing today is an abbreviated version of my very long paper that contains some complicated exposition and argument that I've tried to streamline, hopefully somewhat successfully. So I'll just jump in. The introduction. This essay is a case study about the facilitation of Veronica's personal insight into philosophical issues of the meaning of life, family, and love through the employment of Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue. The study contributes to the literature on methodology in philosophical counseling by elucidating the theory and adaptability of Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue for individual counseling and demonstrating its efficacy through an empirical assessment in Veronica's case. Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue's rigorous analysis of personal experiences to enhance self-understanding and clarification of values merits its use to provide structured facilitation of personal philosophical insight. So the philosophical issue. Veronica's main philosophical issue was one of the big questions in philosophy. What's the meaning of life? But she and I weren't there to speak about this in general, but about the meaning of life for her. So there's a context in which this question came to her. Veronica's questioning the meaning of life turned out to be related to her own examination in respect to various relational identities, such as spouse, parent, child, sibling. And most recently, it recurred to an elevated degree because her adult children were about to leave the family home. She was trying to put together an understanding of her life in respect to these relational identities. And a crucial question, was whether and how she loved in each of these significant relationships. So to meet these aims, we began with relevant history to focus the context within which the issues arose for Veronica. And we agreed that we would focus on family relationships. In general, we wanted to separate these into two categories. Using her preferred words, those were the family of origin, which is the family that she was born into and reared, and the chosen family, which is the one she took active part in creating as an adult. So the chosen family. Veronica is a woman in her 50s who has 2 children and a marriage of about 30 years. She placed her relationship with her partner, I'm going to call that person Ash, at the top of her priorities. And she also said similarly, of course, of her 2 children, Nathan and Ollie. Their paths, she and Ash, first intersected as teenagers. When Veronica met Ash, she observed his difference from the people in her life, noting in particular his exceptional intelligence and his ambition. So although the early days of their relationship did have trials, the two of them found stability with one another, and Veronica recalled having a strong sense that she should stay with Ash. Now, the family that she created with Ash helped her to leave behind a life that she felt would have been like that of her family of origin. So about her family of origin, one of 10 children, Veronica's early life with her family of origin was rife with abuse. Her father, negligent, absent. Her mother, verbally abusive. Family lived in poverty, the home in disrepair. She and her siblings were reared in, as she stated it, a chaotic, unruly, and unkept home. So within the context of Veronica's history, I identified that Veronica and I could address her philosophical issues by focusing on her significant relationships to the topics of family, love, obligation. The relation between Veronica's 2 family categories raised questions for her regarding her ability to love. She pondered whether and how she could love her chosen family if she never learned to love from her family of origin. So as we formulate the core issues, we're going to focus on 3 questions. What is family? What is love? And what is obligation? In this essay, I'm going to focus on our sessions in respect to one method, Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue. Nonetheless, that method is situated within a broader approach, philosophy as a way of life, which is inspired by Pierre Hadot. So I'd like to take a minute to talk about that. My general approach to the sessions adopted Pierre Hadot's conception of philosophy as a way of life. A key point of which is that theory and practice are connected in such a manner that theory does not have independent existence. So Hadot says that many Hellenistic and Roman philosophers conceived philosophy in this manner. The philosophical schools of the time theorized to share and to teach the fundamental principles of the philosophies to their students, and also to become a sort of individual who's a product of living upon those principles. So an individual would join a school of philosophy as a student, and that indicated their conversion to the way of life of that school. So philosophy as a way of life is inseparable from self-transformation. Self-transformation from one way of life to another was carried out by spiritual exercises. Self-transformation may be conceived generally as change to improve self-functionality, meaning-making, through the attainment of meaning, of wisdom. So Hadot defines spiritual exercises as practices by means of which wisdom is sought and obtained. And wisdom includes self-knowledge, knowledge of hierarchical wholes, such as family, society, nature, cosmos. These components of wisdom are sufficient in themselves to cause self-transformation, according to Hadot. Philosophy as a way of life can be adopted to conceive and practice philosophy in manners different than in contemporary academic philosophy. The adoption generates a shift in focus in respect to the product of philosophy, from papers and books to skills, habits, and methods for human well-being. So consequently, philosophical counseling can be conceived as a practice wherein a person undertakes spiritual exercises guided by a counselor. Those spiritual exercises may target self-transformation in respect to the wholes specified by the individual's requests or needs, in this case, family. So spiritual exercises. While I employed several spiritual exercises in this counseling sessions with Veronica, I'm only focusing on Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue. Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue indicates the method of group dialogue devised by Leonard Nelson, a 19th, 20th centuries German neo-Kantian philosopher. The methodology can be enumerated in several steps. So here's an example of how you might do that. First, a theme is selected. Second, formulation of a philosophical question about the theme. Third, sorting through memories of personal experiences that exemplify the theme. Fourth, selection as an example. You select an example from those personal experiences. Fifth, the example is exposited in detail, analyzed into steps. Sixth, the theme is affirmed in the steps of the example. Seventh, one makes a judgment that describes the theme in respect to the example. Eighth, one applies the judgment to other personal examples that exemplify the theme and revises it to subsume them. And then 9, one attempts to falsify the description. So as a spiritual exercise, Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue is a meditation consisting of an analysis of one's life and values. A complete Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue ostensibly discovers that the principle or value belongs to one's cognitive and affective self-constitution. Now, since Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue has not been widely discussed in the literature on spiritual exercises, the claim that it is one needs defense. Fernando Leal convincingly argues for this position. Leal's argument is that Nelson's interpretation of Kant's critical method can be understood as meditation. For Nelson, Kant's deduction is empirical psychological. Deduction proceeds by means of regressive analysis of concrete judgments to their grounds in the conceptual framework of the human mind, as that which constitutes experience. Thereby, deduction shows the concept in question to belong to the person as a being with a rational and effective human mind. And this revelation empowers the person to transform their life by further realization of that concept through cultivation of character. Now, I agree with Leal. And so I wanted to argue in my essay that in support of that, while also arguing that the method could be adapted for philosophical counseling. So my argument proceeds by exposition of a few important components of the theory that's behind Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue. These are Kant's critical method, Kant's transcendental idealism, synthetic a priori knowledge, Kantian deduction, a Friesian dilemma, non-intuitive immediate knowledge, Fries's empirical psychological deduction, Fries's anthropological transcendental idealism. This is really the center of my paper, and it's also where it gets very complicated. I've tried to streamline it here. So turning to Kant, Kant's critical method, by some, has been considered an adaptation of Newton's scientific method. Newton's methodology has two distinct parts referred to as analysis and synthesis. Analysis includes inductive inference by beginning with observations and experimentations regarding concrete instances, and then synthesis is a method akin to deductive inference in contemporary logic. It's a process of justifying the general hypothesis obtained from analysis by deducing the phenomena from them as consequences, thereby showing that the hypotheses are transcendental idealism is the position that empirical reality conforms to the cognitive structures of the human mind. The human mind possesses rules for conceiving reality to which any object must conform if it is to be an object of experience. Application of the mind's constructive concepts is limited to experience. One cannot possess knowledge of the thing in itself by means of this cognitive framework. Now, closely connected to transcendental idealism is Kant's original contribution to knowledge, which is the synthetic a priori. Synthetic a priori judgments cannot be experientially derivative. That's the a priori part. As it organizes appearances through the rules of its cognitive framework. So in the Critique of Pure Reason, deduction makes use of the critical method to discover the a priori principles that condition the possibility of experience, referred to as categories, and to validate them. Kant employs judicial metaphor for this purpose. Legal deduction has two parts. What are the facts, the quid facti, and what is the law, quid juris? The two parts of legal deduction align with the two parts of Newton's method. Quid facti is the analysis of the case into smaller parts through observation and argument, and the discovery of the law that subsumes the facts. Quid juris. Quid juris validates the law as rightfully subsuming the facts, just as synthesis verifies hypotheses through experiment. So, whereas Newton's method discovers and validates natural laws, and legal deduction discovers and validates human constructed laws, Kant's deduction discovers and validates the laws prescribed by the human mind to construct experience, nature. So in the Critique of Pure Reason, Kant provides a metaphysical deduction, quid facti, and a transcendental deduction, quid juris. The metaphysical deduction derives the categories from logical forms of judgment as a guideline, based on the idea that judgment is the correct connection of concepts in thought, meaning judgment has found the law under which the particulars are correctly subsumed. The manner in which each logical form of judgment connects concepts is analyzed to discover the cognitive structure that preconditions it. Now, the transcendental deduction, the quid juris, validates the categories by proving their authorized use and also ascertains their limitations. Kant provides both objective and subjective proofs. The objective proof sets forth the necessity of the categories to account for possible experience by arguing that experience is made possible by the mind's patterns of organization that impose structure on experience. And then in the subjective proof, Kant argues that the construction of experience by the categories relies upon their source in the activity of the self. All right, so enough of Kant. Let's move forward to Jakob Friedrich Fries. Fries was perhaps the earliest empirical psychological interpreter of Kant. He believed that Kant advanced philosophy through his discoveries of the critical method, transcendental idealism, synthetic a priori knowledge, and deduction. And he preserves those in his own thinking, but he also criticizes Kant. He's an innovator. So Fries's criticism and innovation of Kant's deduction leads to what is referred to as the Friesian trilemma. The Friesian trilemma is a theory of the verification of judgment. It proposes that there are three ways to verify judgment: proof, demonstration, and deduction. Proof verifies judgment by means of justification through another judgment as its logical grounds. So when dealing with basic judgments, you run into a problem. It's not possible to derive them from further judgments unless you're going to have an infinite regress or circularity. So demonstration. Demonstration verifies judgment by appealing to sense experience and sense objects. The judgment the blackberries are ripe can be empirically verified by walking to the bush and observing the fruit. So for Kant and Friesian neo-Kantians who accept Hume's argument against the experiential ground of metaphysical judgments cannot be demonstrated. Now deduction. Deduction, like demonstration, reveals something by pointing, but unlike demonstration, deduction does not point to perceptual objects in intuition. If it did, it would just reduce the demonstration. Since metaphysical judgments can't be demonstrated, they must be deduced. So in the Friesian trilemma, the differences between proof, demonstration, and deduction relate to distinct sources of knowledge. Fries theorizes about a source of knowledge that Kant, he thinks, missed. The Friesian trilemma distinguishes three types of verification on the grounds that there are distinct sources of knowledge that require separate types of verification. Traditionally, knowledge breaks down into two sorts: reflection, sense intuition. Reflection is knowledge by means of thought through concepts. Concepts mediate appearances, and they are combined in judgments. Now, since judgment combines concepts that are representations of appearances, judgment is mediate knowledge. Mediate knowledge requires verification. In inferential judgment, a judgment that's arrived at through a process of reasoning, can be verified by proof. But non-inferential or basic judgments can't be verified by proofs. But as mediate knowledge, they still require verification. So verification of mediate knowledge relies upon immediate knowledge. Sense intuition is immediate knowledge that is given directly to consciousness. Demonstration is the verification of a basic judgment by pointing to the immediate knowledge of sense intuition. But there's another type of immediate knowledge other than sense intuition. Fries rejects the completeness of the sources of knowledge as posited in the disjunction of reflection and sense intuition, in which sense intuition conflates the concepts of immediacy of knowledge and immediacy of knowledge to consciousness. So in addition to the immediate knowledge of sense intuition, there is non-intuitive immediate knowledge. Non-intuitive immediate knowledge can verify the immediate knowledge of judgment because of its immediacy. But since it is non-intuitive, its immediacy is not given directly to consciousness, as in the case of sense intuition. So on the grounds that metaphysical judgments are synthetic a priori, they must trace back to non-intuitive immediate knowledge, so says Fries. This leads to the notion that metaphysical knowledge is obscure knowledge. In other words, humans have metaphysical knowledge of which they're ignorant. Since non-intuitive immediate knowledge is by its nature obscure, verification of judgment that relies upon it must proceed by bringing that knowledge to consciousness. Deduction is the method of verification of non-intuitive immediate knowledge. It brings this knowledge to consciousness through reflection. So only by means of judgment in reflection can this immediate yet obscure knowledge become clear. And the next factor that is important here is Fries's innovation of the Kantian doctrine of transcendental idealism. Some neo-Kantian interpretations of Kant's transcendental idealism are that it's about reason as distinct from any rational being necessarily. So consequently, transcendental idealism would hold for any rational being. Fries, however, interprets it to be about human cognition. He thinks a disembodied reason would be quite an oddity. So his anthropological transcendental idealism is true for human cognition, and beyond human situated reason, we simply can't say anything. Now, Fries's anthropology changes the procedure of deduction to an analysis of inner experience or internal self-observation. The principle that is discovered through deduction is a principle of human cognition. An upshot of anthropological transcendental idealism is that humanity substitutes reason, and thereby deduction shifts focus from who I am as a rational being to who I am as a human. Perhaps I may say that to undergo a Friesian deduction is more personal than to undergo a Kantian deduction, depending on your interpretation of Kant, maybe. The specific procedure of Friesian deduction follows the legal metaphor employed by Kant, but with changes. Whereas the analytic method of quid facti discovers the obscure principle in human knowledge, the synthetic method of quid juris recognizes the immediacy of metaphysical knowledge. The quid facti is an empirical psychological investigation of inner experience that uncovers the non-intuitive immediate knowledge that we have in fact. That non-intuitive immediate knowledge as immediate needs no further justification. So after discovery of the fact that there is such knowledge, the recognition of its immediacy constitutes the quid juris. The special standing of metaphysical knowledge is immediate but not conscious. Therefore, the artificial procedure of bringing it to consciousness through reflection suffices for the quid juris. So Fries's empirical psychological deduction is the theory, the original theory, behind Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue. As a Friesian deduction, Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue has a few essential points. First, by analyzing a personal experience and making a relevant judgment in respect to a theme, the participant in Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue is capturing operations of synthesis at two distinct levels. On one level, the synthetic structural rules for possible experience. On another level, the synthetic conceptual representation of experience in judgment. Second, using the concrete judgment as a guide, the participant abstracts and describes the elements that are its grounds, and thereby avoids the creation of arbitrary technical terms. Third, by describing the principle, the participant brings it into conscious knowledge. So I spent so much time dealing with this in order to argue that it fits Hadot's conception of a spiritual exercise and that it could be adapted for philosophical counseling. My reasons for this is that it aims to impact participants cognitively and effectively, foster self-attention, and develop a rational community. Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue holds transformative power by revealing one's reasoning processes, presuppositions, and values through the close examination of one's past concrete experiences. Not only does Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue attend to the self and putatively uncover truths constitutive of oneself, but the process of doing so may reveal one's own self-deception. It's a process by which one's self-misconceptions are challenged and revised. So when in ignorance of the constitutive, cognitive, and affective framework of oneself, one may develop false beliefs. So for example, one may believe that they don't know what justice is, but then after reviewing an example from a judgment regarding one's personal experience, discover that one does in fact know justice, and that would dispel the initial self-deceitful belief. So application. Enough theory. Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue has had several applications in Veronica's case. I immediately began a search for relevant themes after meeting Veronica, and I procured her agreement to discuss them. For Veronica, there were three: family, love, obligation. Subsequent to discovering those themes, questions are formulated to address them. Our questions were very simple here. What is family? What is love? What is obligation? We employed the methodology to examine those questions. So according to the method, after a theme and a question have been chosen, the next step is to sort through memories of personal experiences of the topic. In my experience, this may consume a vast amount of time, although occasionally participants like, I've got some. One way to manage time and avoid that issue is to assign it as homework for the participant. I did that in this case. This way you can immediately take up the next step in the following session. So I requested also that Veronica bring several personal experiences to our sessions on family to obviate the difficulty that one or more of those examples might turn out unsuited for the work. And also we could have a plurality to abstract from to a generality. So once the participant has their examples, one is selected to focus, and the participant and the facilitator, the counselor, analyze it. The significance of Veronica's example is understandable in light of her childhood. Again, could Veronica give to her child what she did not receive from her parents? So here's the breakdown into steps. Number one, Nathan, one of the children, was a first-year high school student. 2, he had a French language class. 3, throughout the class, Nathan didn't do the homework. So 4, at the end of the course, Nathan fails. 5, Veronica and Ash, who were previously unaware of the issue, are upset. 6, the two of them hold a discussion with Nathan. 7, they explained that Nathan's college education depends on his success in high school, and they expressed their desire for Nathan to do well. 8, initially embarrassed, Nathan responded positively. So, following the detailed analysis of the example, the participant makes a judgment, responding to the initial question as it is in the example. Then the participant abstracts from the specifics of the example to a general description of the subject. Sometimes a participant can really struggle here to arrive at a concrete judgment or a general definition. In such cases, the counselor can encourage them to proceed by descriptions that may seem kind of disconnected to one another. That's what happened here with Veronica. So Veronica offered the following: not playing a rebellious game by screaming in anger, taking responsibility for self, treating Nathan with respect and not as an idiot, being graceful, giving stability, modeling communication. And so after we went through that, Veronica was able to attempt a definition of family, which yielded this: a loving and cohesive unit that communicates and handles situations gracefully with one another. Now, I emphasized, hey, it's wonderful that we got this. It's tentative. Hold on to it. Test it further. Later, we also used the same example that I've outlined to discuss love. So, a participant perspective survey. Veronica completed a participant perspective survey after the final session, consisting of questions assessing the educational and therapeutic benefits of her experience with philosophical counseling. She evaluated philosophical counseling as very educational and therapeutic. Her written responses indicate that she gained an improved understanding of family and love and how they are present in her relationships with her children and her spouse. Additionally, her self-understanding has improved, clearing away her misconceptions related to herself as a child and her family of origin. Veronica attributes these benefits to the features of the method. For her, the crucial features are in-depth examination of particular experiences and engaging interaction. Now, my own evaluation. In Veronica's case, the method helped to dissolve the misconceptions she formed of herself at an early age by scrutinizing several personal experiences. Was factually doing and the values constitutive of her person. In particular, Veronica's examination of her concrete experience in which she holds a confident judgment that it was an act of love between parents and child led to a less ambiguous knowledge of love by working to describe it as it was in that moment and define it in abstraction. This method of dialogue served to clarify how her life with her family, her chosen family, has many instances of love, and thereby she both knows what love is and has loved, even though she doubted that she could love properly because her early life with her family of origin did not teach or demonstrate love sufficiently. So in conclusion, situated within Hadot's conception of philosophy as a way of life, Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue can be adapted for philosophical counseling. This case provides some evidence for the efficacy of the method for philosophical counseling. Based on the case and its empirical assessment, the novel contributions of the method are its participant engagement and detailed analysis of particular personal experiences to obtain self-understanding and clarification of knowledge of values. So while the Friesian neo-Kantian theory behind the development of Nelsonian Socratic Dialogue provides support for its employment as a meditative method for philosophical counseling, the counselor does not need to subscribe to the theory in every respect. One upshot of critical philosophy is its openness to revision. It holds system as an ideal that cannot attain final form, and analysis is unending. So further research using the method adapted for philosophical counseling may produce theoretical development. That ends my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. That's a very creative use, as you well know. Can we visibly applaud this analysis and case study? Thank you, Kevin, for that very hard work. and also for explaining, I think, what is a fairly unique kind of a synthesis between Hadot and Nelson. And as those of you know who've been through Socratic dialogue training formally, we need a group precisely because we need that plurality of example in the beginning that you were able to elicit from your client to substitute for the absence of the group. So you could finesse that well enough. And I would like to throw the floor open since we do have 10 minutes. If anyone would like to question or comment, please feel free. Put your hand up electronically if you like, or just signal. And or has Kevin left you speechless?
Maybe I didn't streamline it enough.
Nancy, is that you? Is your hand up? Welcome. Nice to see you. Please unmute. And
Yep.
let's put a spotlight on you. Hang on.
Oh, you didn't tell me that was going to happen.
Oh, well, this is what you get for raising your hand, you know.
I guess no good deed goes unnoticed, unpunished. Kevin, nice to see you again. I really love this paper, and since doing Socratic dialogue training myself, I have been thinking along these lines in some ways. So the bigger stumbling block for me than the ability to elicit a number of examples from one individual, for whatever question you're exploring, is how to ensure that the ensuing dialogue about the examples isn't just sort of reinforcing personal biases or gaps or whatever we want to say in the one client's perspective, since you don't have the other group. And related to that, I'm highly influenced when I think about individual client counseling by why can't I say Peter Robb's work. And he's very good about really listening on the front end, and then at some point, but only sort of with the client's permission, you can turn to sort of challenging their thinking. And so on this notion, like if you have a series of examples coming from a client and you really think they all reflect a real error in reasoning or mistake, like at what point would you maybe start to interject, and how does that change really the dynamic? Because one of the things that's so interesting in the Socratic dialogue is you're trying to reach consensus around all these people, so it's never that one person is sort of being called out as missing some aspect. So that was a lot for you to chew on, but I'd love to hear your thoughts since you've really worked through this.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate it, and it's nice to see you again too. So this is one of the obstacles, I think, to potentially using the method in one-on-one situations. Absolutely, maybe the biggest one. It just can't quite do the same thing that a group can do. So in my experience using it, I do take on somewhat more of an active role probably. And that's the part where the participant perspective survey did say it was highly engaging. If she was the only one doing everything, it wouldn't have been that.
Right.
So there's, I guess, potentially is also another danger alongside what you're bringing up, which is, am I potentially influencing too much, right? But I haven't really run into the situation in which someone has brought an example that didn't actually work, or I thought wouldn't work. They've all so far kind of worked for me, so I'm limited on what I could say in response to that particular part. I think that maybe this would be one of the important reasons to ask them to bring several examples so that you could work through more than one, and those examples could serve as tests for one another. And so if you have two examples that kind of suggest that this other one, you might be an error here, then you kind of turn the direction towards those other two. Was there another part to your question that I've missed now? Because that's
I think so. I mean, this all makes sense to me, and again, I really appreciate it. That though, I guess my more pointed concern, like if even you select a great example, and they have other examples, like in the traditional method, once you really formulated a definition using the one core example, you would then apply it to try to accommodate the other examples, and that's where I just worry that all the examples, because they came from the same person, if there's something going on in their thinking like that, to me, more examples don't help there. So that's where I do think you would just have to play a more active role as
So
the counselor.
You do definitely probably have to play that more active role, but also, so some things that you could do differently, because it also goes more quickly with one person, would be, so in the group method, usually, in my experience with how it's done, is you don't then go back to the other examples and go into heavy detail with those. But because it goes more quickly, and this is just the focus, you can go into heavy detail with all of them, and that can further maybe prevent the issue a little bit. But also, I do emphasize, as I emphasized with Veronica in this particular these sessions, that the definition that she arrived at, hey, look, it's great that you got something, you can hang on to it, use it, but don't take it to be the thing. It's probably the case that you're going to run up against something that's going to require that you revise it in some significant way, but that doesn't keep it from being useful to you in some ways now. So yeah, it's important to emphasize that, I think, to them.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, for asking. And those were my questions exactly verbatim. So I think you really nailed it. And Kevin, that was I think a great answer. You're also getting a commendation. Rick has his hand up. We'll go to him next, but you're getting in the chat room a compliment from Pia, our Finnish colleague who has extensive experience in the Nelson Heckman tradition from Germany. So she is also chiming in, I think, some approval. But just to make sure that you keep things on a philosophical, not a psychological footing when you're working in the one-on-one modality. Nonetheless, thank you, Pia, for contributing that. And go ahead, Rick, please unmute.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to add to maybe the answer to Nancy's question to remind us that, well, at least in the formal Nelsonian Socratic dialogue thing, the last stage at the bottom of the hourglass is when we can bring up hypothetical and counterfactual and genuine kind of Socratic challenges, midwifing, of whatever the final consensus definition is, even the consensus within the limited examples that might be biased by that individual's ignorance or whatever, right? So that's where that could come in. The rectification would come in the last step. That's what I would imagine.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Rick. I appreciate that a lot.
Okay, that's all I had to say. Yeah, well, great. I've been thinking about ways of applying Nelsonian Socratic dialogue in one-on-one cases. I played around with it a little bit, but I'm really looking forward to reading your longer version. Especially, I haven't sunken my head into Kant's thinking in a long time. So, but I remember all of it. Just hearing you, that was fun. Having it intelligently connected with this, the facti, quid facti, quid juris thing. Interesting little lens that you brought to that. I'm looking forward to reading your longer paper. Thank you.
Yeah, we're looking forward to publishing it, but remember, we also have limitations on length, and I'm hoping. And Rick, you know this well. Also, we never have a problem getting philosophers to write too little, but on the other hand, we have a kind of theoretical, and Ross is nodding too. We would like things to be in the neighborhood of 6,000 to 7,000 words, which would be really a very rich article for our journal. But when they start going north of there, we have some some concerns. But anyway, we'll all fix that in the mix when we come to the editing phase. Okay. So thank you very much again. Kevin, you're doing interesting and innovative work, and I certainly hope that you keep it up and keep reporting to us if you get some case studies either that are satisfactory or indeed that don't work in this way, and then we can learn also. We learn more from failure sometimes than from success, right? but always we want to report the successes naturally. So congratulations on your continued success, and thank you for contributing today. Vona, I'm going to turn things back to you because Rick, you're on deck now, or just about to come to bat. Last but surely not least, and Vona is going to introduce you. So let me do some rearrangement. And thanks again, Kevin. We'll be in touch.